I'm Rob Finnerty. Just a couple of thoughts on what happened in Minneapolis at 8:15 a.m. this morning. Just horrific. An unspeakable crime during the first week of school at the Annunciation Catholic Church. The shooter opening fire this morning on people who were inside the church praying. Think about that. The shooter opening fire on one of the softest targets there is, a Catholic church during Mass, which tells you everything you need to know about the shooter. The shooter opening fire at a place that exists to welcome people where the doors are typically unlocked. The shooter also opening fire on the most innocent targets that we have. Small children, kids between the ages of 4 and 14, praying in a church on a Wednesday morning in August. But one 9-year-old boy says his best friend saved him by covering his body when the bullets started pouring through those stained glass windows. He survived, but his best friend was hit.
The shots fired, and then he kind of got under the pews. It kind of they shot through the stained glass windows, I think, and it was really scary.
Yeah. What did you do after that?
Well, we waited 10 to 5 minutes. I don't really know. My friend got hit in the back.
Did he go to the hospital?
Yeah, he went to the hospital.
What went through your mind when you saw that?
I was super scared for him, but I think now he's okay.
We're told that little boy is going to be okay. Dozens of people were injured. At least 17 went to the hospital, and 2 students, ages 8 and 10 years old, will never go home again. According to the sheriff, the students were on their knees praying when this happened. They were on their knees praying when one of the worst people in our society opened fire on some of the best. And there are no words for the parents of those 2 children tonight. This is beyond thoughts and prayers. What happened today will impact everyone who is in that church for the rest of their lives, and that is a tragedy. Christians are now the most prosecuted religion in the country, in this country. Nobody ever talks about it, and yet Christians seem like the happiest despite this. Think about that. These children were targeted because of their faith during the first week of school because they believe in God. And they were cut down when their lives had just begun by someone whose real identity the rest of the media ignored today. But we're not going to do that. We're not going to pretend the identity of the shooter doesn't matter. We're not going to do that, and we are going to name him. We're not going to name the shooter. We're going to name the shooter, and we're going to tell you everything we think is relevant because it does matter. There is a trans violence crisis in this country, and half the country, many of the same people who voted for Kamala Harris, just don't seem to care. Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, tweeting today, the FBI is investigating this shooting as an act of domestic terrorism and a hate crime targeting Catholics. The shooter has been identified as Robin Westman, a male born as Robert Westman. The FBI will continue to provide updates on our ongoing investigation with the public as we are able to, meaning that according to the director of the FBI, the shooter was transgender. A trans shooter in a state where Democrats have made it perfectly clear that they support the insanity that this has become, what we now call the trans community in this country.
Minneapolis will continue to be a safe haven for undocumented immigrants, for our trans community.
Minnesota ranks the highest per capita for being a safe haven for transgender individuals in Minnesota.
We have sued them for gender-affirming care. Yes, we are not going to scapegoat our transgender community.
When our children tell us who they are, it is our job as grown-ups to listen and to believe them.
Actually, it's your job as a grown-up to tell the child to be quiet and do their homework. If your child comes down and says, I think I'm a girl, you say that's great. You don't go and have surgery done on your little boy. But immediately after the shooting this morning, the legacy media didn't report what was very important, the identity of who this shooter really was. CNN today, sources say law enforcement has identified the shooter as Robin Westman, meaning according to CNN, the shooter was a woman named Robin. NBC News today, multiple senior law enforcement officials say federal law enforcement has identified the shooter as Robin Westman, meaning according to NBC News, the shooter was a woman named Robin. CBS News today, law enforcement sources tell CBS News the shooter was Robin Westman, age 23. from suburban Minneapolis, meaning, according to CBS News, the shooter was a woman named Robin. But none of that is true. The largest newspaper in the state doing the exact same thing today, the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, identifying the shooter as a woman named Robin. But Robin is not his real name. Robin's real name is Robert, because Robin is a man. But the left doesn't want to talk about that because this doesn't fit their narrative. And Robin Westman was a deeply, deeply disturbed man. But instead of having a real, honest conversation about this new category of terrorism that we've suddenly invented in this country, radical left-wing trans terrorism, Democrats immediately made today about guns.
It, of course, makes me think about guns and all the work we've done to ban these automatic rifles and to do something when it comes to the background checks and everything, and we keep getting thwarted.
It seemed like a rifle, he said, a semi-automatic rifle, and it went on for several minutes.
Right, and look, that's not uncommon as well. These things can shoot dozens of bullets, you know, in just one trigger pull, right? And so what happens in this case is sometimes they have enough time to reload.
That and the shooter was a mentally ill trans person. Don't you think that's relevant? Jen Psaki made what happened today in a church in Minnesota about Donald Trump trying to clean up Washington, D.C., tweeting that when kids are getting shot in their pews at a Catholic school mass and your crime plan is to have the National Guard put mulch down around D.C., maybe rethink your strategy. Like, how out to lunch can you possibly be? What Jen doesn't seem to realize is that the political rhetoric from people like her created the anti-Christian hate that exists in this country today. And the mayor of Minneapolis today with this very odd reaction after we all saw him cry when George Floyd was buried, literally crying with a mask on. There were no tears this morning after little kids in his own city were shot to death.
There's no way. And in your heart.
Don't just say this is about thoughts and prayers right now. These kids were literally praying. It was the first week of school. They were in a church. These are kids that should be learning with their friends.
Normally, we wouldn't describe something like this, but when we found out what was on those stained glass windows in that church, we were stunned. The massive 3-panel stained glass window, 30 by 50, in that church depicts an angel with a sword, protecting people depicted below from the fall of humanity. The window is flanked by the angel Gabriel on the right, and in the center is the Blessed Virgin Mary, the ultimate symbol of purity in the eyes of evil. These children died beneath that window, praying for what any 8- and 10-year-old would pray for at the start of the school year. Think about that. What does that say about our culture and where we are today? What does that say about us? We don't have a sociologist on staff here, but we do have common sense. Enough common sense to know that we just can't continue to live like this. And maybe it's time to have an honest, real conversation about why this is all now a problem with trans people in America, and why affirming someone's gender and pumping them full of hormones might not be the best way to treat someone who's struggling with their gender identity. This should be about help, not about hate.